Imagine the air itself is a liquid, a thick, hot broth of 40 degrees Celsius that you don't breathe so much as drink. Every lungful is heavy, saturated with the scent of wet earth, rotting flowers, and something else, a primal green fecundity that presses against your skin. The Amazon canopy, 150 feet above, stitches the sky into a fractured mosaic of blinding light and deep shadow. Below, in the perpetual twilight of the forest floor, the humidity sits at 95%. Your clothes are a second skin of sweat. A simple walk isn't walking. It's a slow, deliberate wading through a thermal ocean. Every vine is a tripwire, every root a stumble. The mud doesn't just give way, it sucks, claiming a boot with a wet gasp. This is the baseline, the constant, the jungle's opening offer. Now, build a shelter, not a lean-to for an afternoon nap, a structure meant to last, to protect. Your first task is to gather materials. You find a promising palm, its fronds broad and strong. You pull, the leaf resists, its fibers tough as cordage. You wrestle it free, the effort spiking your core temperature. You're not just hot, you're cooking from the inside. One leaf. You need 24. The weight is negligible at first, but by the fifth frond, carried through that soupy air over that uneven ground, it feels like dragging a carpet of lead. Your arms burn. The salt from your sweat stings your eyes. You find poles, straight, sturdy saplings. You cut them with your machete. Each swing is a commitment. The thwack of the blade echoes, a sharp punctuation in the humid silence. The vibration travels up your arm. 10 swings, 20. The sapling finally falls. You drag it back to your site. One pole, you need 6. The distance seems to double with each trip. The heat is no longer just an environment, it's an active opponent, leaching your strength, turning your muscles to wet clay. You think the hard part is the labor, the hauling, the cutting, the building. That was just the beginning. Because now you have your shelter. A frame of lashed poles, a thatch of overlapping palm fronds. It looks right. It feels like an achievement. You crawl inside, seeking refuge from the oppressive heat. For a moment, there's relief. The direct glare is gone. Then, you notice it. A single drop of condensation forms on the underside of a frond above you. It swells, glistening in the dim light. It hangs and falls. A cold, startling tap on your neck, then another and another. Inside your shelter, it's raining. The very moisture you sought to keep out is now dripping on you. A slow, maddening Chinese water torture from your own roof. Your bedding, your gear, everything is slowly dampening. Outside, the jungle is a symphony of decay. You can hear it. The soft collapse of a fallen log being consumed by fungi. The relentless work of billions of bacteria and insects breaking down everything organic. Leaves, fruit, animal carcasses, nothing lasts. It all returns to the mud in weeks, sometimes days. And your shelter? It's made of the jungle's favorite food, wood and leaf. So the real question isn't how to build a shelter. Anybody can lash sticks together. The real, terrifying question hangs in that damp, dripping air. How do you build something that won't die? In a place where everything rots, how do you create a pocket of permanence? How do you fight an enemy you can't even see? An army of mold, fungus, and bacteria that never sleeps in an atmosphere that feeds them like a banquet. This was never about construction. It was about creating a biological fortress. The indigenous tribes of the Amazon didn't just see a pile of wood and leaves. They saw a future battlefield. Every material was a potential breach in the walls, every joint a future colony for decay. Their shelters weren't architecture, they were a strategic denial of the jungle's most fundamental law, the law of return. To them, a shelter that lasted a month wasn't a shelter. It was a failure waiting to happen. They weren't building a house. They were waging a silent, meticulous war against entropy itself. And it started not with the first cut of the machete, but with a choice so specific it bordered on the obsessive. The choice of a single tree. Forget the straight trunk, the easy-to-cut wood, the conveniently placed tree. In the Amazon, convenience is a trap. The jungle offers you 1,000 perfect-looking trees. 999 of them are invitations to disaster. The system began with a brutal, non-negotiable rule: species selection. This wasn't a preference, it was a mandate. The pau d'arco, the kumru, the ipe. These names aren't just timber, they are statements. Their wood is dense, oily, and packed with complex chemical compounds, natural toxins. To an insect, to a fungus spore, this wood isn't food. It's poison. It's a wall of silent chemical no. But here's the complication. The perfect tree is never in the perfect place. Your chosen epee might stand half a mile from your intended site, up a steep root-tangled incline, across a stream swollen from a morning rain. Distance is the first tax the jungle levies. You will pay it in sweat, in time, in calories you cannot afford to burn. Now, cut it. Your machete, so effective on softer saplings, rings against this wood like striking stone. The vibration is a jolt to the bones. You switch to a heavier axe. Each swing is a full-body commitment, a controlled explosion of energy in the 40-degree heat. The rhythm is punishing. Lift, swing, thud. Lift, swing, thud. The chip that flies off is small, stubborn. This isn't cutting. It's persuasion through sheer repeated impact. 40 swings, 80. Your shoulders scream. The handle grows slick in your palms. The tree finally falls with a deep groaning crash that echoes through the green cathedral. Now the real work begins. You cannot drag this log. It's too heavy, too dense. It would plow a furrow through the forest floor, sapping your last reserves. So you section it. More swinging, more impact. You reduce the giant to manageable, brutal weights. Each section is a victory you can barely lift. Transport is a slow-motion siege. You might roll the sections using smaller logs as rollers, a primitive but effective technology that turns sliding friction into rolling friction. You gain 10 feet, then stop to reposition the rollers. Gain another 10. It's a grueling, iterative puzzle. Or you lash the wood to your back with vines, the bark digging into your skin, and take steps that are less like walking and more like controlled falling forward. The heat wraps around you, a physical barrier. Your world narrows to the next 3 feet of ground, the next route to avoid, the next breath to drag into your burning lungs. Think of the energy expenditure. The caloric math becomes terrifying. A man might burn 4,000 calories on this single task of acquisition alone. In an environment where food is often scarce or requires immense skill to procure, this is a monumental strategic investment. You are literally burning your future sustenance to build a tomorrow. Why not use the softer, lighter wood right next to the clearing? It's the obvious choice, the human choice. It would save you days of labor, gallons of sweat. That choice is the beginning of the end. Softer wood is porous. It drinks the humid air like a sponge. Within days, it becomes a damp hotel for fungal hyphae, microscopic threads that penetrate deep, secreting enzymes that dissolve the wood from the inside out. Insects follow, sensing the weakness, boring intricate tunnels that turn structural supports into brittle lacework. What you built in 2 days, the jungle would reclaim in 2 weeks. Your shelter becomes a collapsing, rotten mockery of safety. The tribes understood this with a clarity that bypassed short-term comfort. The material was the first and most important line of defense. By choosing the ipe, they were front-loading all the pain. They were taking the entire brutal cost of durability, the back-breaking labor, the exhausting transport, and paying it up front in a single terrible installment. They traded days of extreme effort for months of passive security. The tree wasn't just a resource, it was a time capsule. Its natural resistance was a force multiplier, working for you silently every minute of every day, long after your axe had fallen silent. While you slept, or hunted, or simply sat, the chemical defenses in that wood were on guard duty. This was the foundation of the system, a brutal calculus of effort versus time. You could suffer immensely now, or suffer catastrophically later, but the right wood was only the first layer. Having a poison log was useless if you assembled it like a welcome mat for the enemy. The joining of these defiant pieces was its own kind of language, a language of exclusion. You have your fortress logs, poisonous, dense, defiant. Now you must marry them. This is where most shelters fail, not from the outside, but from within. Think of a simple notch, a square cut where one log rests on another. It seems strong, it looks right. In the jungle, that notch is a death sentence. It's a cup, a perfect tiny reservoir for the one thing that's everywhere, water. Rain drips from a leaf above, finds the notch, and sits there. Not for minutes, for hours, days. In that stagnant micropool, the wood, even resistant wood, begins to soften. It's a beachhead. Once the surface is compromised, the invasion can begin. Fungi establish that first, tiny colony. Then insects. The joint, the very heart of your structure's strength, becomes its point of failure. It rots from the inside out, hidden from view, until the day a pole simply snaps under a minor load. The indigenous builder saw this coming from 10 paces away. His solution wasn't a better notch, it was the elimination of the shelf altogether. Enter the locking joint. A concept so simple it's genius, and so labor-intensive it's brutal. Instead of a log resting on another, they were interlocked with each other. Imagine a complex wooden puzzle, angled cuts that made the vertical pole and the horizontal beam lock together in a tight embrace, their weight and friction distributing the load along multiple planes. The contact points were angled downward, like a roof pitch for a joint. Any water that landed there was shed immediately, dripped away, denied a home. Creating this joint under the canopy was an act of precision in a world of chaos. It required careful marking, meticulous cutting with that heavy axe, not just brute force, but controlled surgical blows. A mistake meant ruining a log you'd spent a day extracting. The pressure was immense, the focus absolute. Sweat dripped into your eyes, mosquitoes hummed, you ignored it all. The margin for error was zero. Then came the binding. Vines. Not just any vine. You needed lianas specific in their flexibility and tensile strength. You soaked them to make them pliable. The lashing pattern wasn't random crisscross. It was a tight helical weave that pulled the joint tighter as force was applied. It was a self-tightening system. But even this was a vulnerability. The vine itself was organic. It would rot. So they didn't just lash it, they smoked it. The frame, once assembled, was subjected to a low, persistent smoke from a specific resinous fire. For days. The smoke didn't just smell, it penetrated. It deposited a thin layer of tar and antimicrobial compounds on every surface, inside every crevice of the joint. It cured the binding vines, turning them from perishable fiber into a tougher, more resistant cord. This wasn't a finishing touch, it was a chemical sealing, a final gaseous layer of defense. Now step back, look at the system forming. Layer 1, the material, inherently toxic. Layer 2, the geometry, hydrophobic, self-shedding. Layer 3, the binding, mechanically tightening, then chemically cured. Each layer addressed a different vector of attack. The material fought biological consumption, the geometry fought water accumulation, the binding fought mechanical failure and its own decay. Together, They created a synergistic barrier. The whole was far more durable than the sum of its parts. But the jungle is relentless. It doesn't attack just from the outside, it attacks from above. The thatch, a roof of 1,000 leaves. This is the shelter's largest surface area, its greatest exposure. A thatch roof done wrong is a sponge, a dripping ceiling, a nursery for mold. The choice of palm was, again, specific. But the technique was everything. The fronds weren't just piled on. They were layered like scales on a fish or shingles on a roof. Each overlapping row was set at a precise angle, ensuring that water cascaded down and off, never finding a path inward. The thickness was calculated, not just for rain, but for insulation against the thermal mass of the air. It created a buffer zone, a microclimate, and beneath the thatch, a final, clever trick, an air gap, a space between the top of the living area and the underside of the thatch. This gap allowed for ventilation. It let the hot, moisture-laden air rising from your body and your fire to flow up and out, carried away by subtle convection currents. It prevented condensation from forming on the underside of the roof. That cold drip on your neck, designed out of existence. What you are looking at is no longer a collection of wood and leaves. It is a machine for creating and maintaining a condition utterly alien to the Amazon rainforest, dryness. It is a humidity negating device. Every element, from the molecular composition of the wood to the macroscopic pitch of the roof, is engineered towards one paradoxical goal: to create a bubble of desert in the middle of an ocean of green. The shelter isn't protecting you from rain or sun. Those are secondary. It is protecting you from the atmosphere itself. It is a lifeboat in an atmospheric sea that is actively, chemically hostile to human permanence. The tribes weren't just builders, they were ecological engineers, manipulating microclimates with sticks and smoke. They understood the enemy was not the tiger or the snake. The enemy was the air. And they had learned how to bend it to their will. So you have it. Your biological fortress, your machine for dryness. It stands defiant in the green gloom. No mold creeps over its smoked timbers. No drips fall from its scaly roof. The joints are tight, shedding water like a duck's back. You have achieved the impossible, a pocket of permanence. Now, sit inside. Listen. The jungle sounds are muffled, distant. The constant buzz and chirp and screech is filtered, pushed back. The light is soft, diffused through the thick thatch. The air, while still warm, doesn't have that liquid suffocating weight. For the first time in days, your skin feels almost dry. Your mind, which has been bombarded by 1,000 sensory inputs, the heat, the sweat, the biting insects, the constant vigilance for trip hazards and hidden threats, begins to quiet. The sheer cognitive load of existing in the furnace lifts. Just a little. Just enough. This is the strategic result. It was never about the shelter. It was about the space the shelter created. A space not just of physical protection, but of psychological recovery. A space where calories weren't being burned just to regulate body temperature. A space where the nervous system could downshift from a perpetual state of red alert. In an environment that weaponizes exhaustion, that grinds you down hour by hour, this dry, stable void was the ultimate advantage. It converted brutal upfront labor into a continuous daily dividend of restored capacity, while others would be constantly repairing, rebuilding, battling the insidious decay of their own homes. You were resting. Your shelter was working for you. That rest translated into sharper senses for the hunt, into more patience for crafting tools, into the mental clarity to navigate, to remember, to plan. The shelter was a force multiplier for human capability. It bought you the most precious resource in a survival context: focused time. But this advantage came etched in pain. The human cost was baked into the logs. It was the permanent ache in the lower back from hauling the epee. The raw, blistered hands that gripped the axe handle long after the work was done. The deep, bone-tired fatigue that comes not from a day's labor, but from a week's siege against an entire ecosystem. It was the psychological toll of that upfront investment, spending immense energy on a future benefit while your stomach growled in the present. It required a discipline that could override basic human instinct for ease, for the path of least resistance. It demanded a culture that valued tomorrow's security over today's comfort. And this is the final, chilling insight. This knowledge of the poison tree, the locking joint, the smoked lashing, it wasn't just practical wisdom, it was a cultural signature, a marker of deep generational adaptation. A tribe that mastered this didn't just survive the jungle. They inverted its logic. They took the very principle that made the jungle so powerful, its relentless, efficient recycling of all things, and created a sterile bubble where that principle did not apply. Their shelters stood for years, sometimes decades. Long after the people had moved on, the structure would remain, a gray skeleton in the green, slowly weathering but not rotting. A ghost of human will. It reveals a brutal hierarchy of survival. At the bottom, the individual struggling against the elements. Then, the group working together. But at the top, the system. The invisible architecture of knowledge, material science, fluid dynamics, chemical preservation. Encoded not in books, but in ritual, in story, in the muscle memory of the correct axe swing. This system turned the environment from an overwhelming foe into a set of solvable problems. It granted not just safety, but sovereignty. So the next time you see a picture of a simple jungle hut, don't see a primitive dwelling. See a calculated defiance. See a time capsule of effort. See a psychological fortress built from poisoned wood and geometry. It represents a simple, profound truth. In a world designed to break everything down, the ultimate power is not strength. It's the ability to make things last. What other invisible systems are hidden in plain sight, turning impossible environments into homes? What looks like simplicity to us is actually the pinnacle of a forgotten sophistication. If you found this perspective shift compelling, consider subscribing. We deconstruct the hidden logic behind seemingly ordinary things. The world is full of silent strategic voids waiting to be seen.